A breakdown of this year's budget of 21.8 trillion shows defense and security got the lion's share of 2.98 trillion. The budget has a deficit of 11.3 trillion. At the breakdown of 2023 appropriation in Abuja, 8% of the revenues expected from the oil sector, while 22% will be from non-oil sector. The federal government also revealed that the incoming administration will inherit 77 trillion naira debt by the time President Buhari's tenure ends in May. Arise business and energy correspondent Oyi Sunday tells us more.
While the focus is usually on the total projected amount, current and recurrent expenditure, the place to look is the actual allocation to critical sectors of the economy, which gives a clear picture of what the budget really offers. Well, some might argue that the percentage allocated to the current and recurrent expenditure says all there is to say about the budget. So let's begin there. The 21.83 trillion naira budget, with an oil price benchmark of $75 per barrel, has a recurrent expenditure of 8.33 trillion naira. The capital expenditure of 6.46 trillion naira is 3% of the total expenditure and lower than the 3.5% recorded in 2022. At 6.3 trillion naira, debt service is 29% of total expenditure, 71% higher than the 2022 estimate, which includes interest payment of 1.2 trillion naira for the contested Ways and Means.
In terms of debt management, again, I'm sure the audience here is familiar with our medium-term debt management strategy, which has some fiscal sustainability measures, including that public debt as a percentage of GDP should not be more than 40%. Domestic and external debt ratio should be 70-30. So at public debt to GDP, we have 22.8%. This is as at 2022, but this has since moved on to 35.33%. Once we, this is as of September, once we adjust to the Ways and Means that has already been approved to be securitized. So once we bring it in, this will take us to 35.33%.
A look at the critical sectors show that defense and security gets the lion's share with 2.98 trillion naira, followed by education at 1.79 trillion naira. Infrastructure gets 1.24 trillion naira, while health gets 1.15 trillion naira. The overall budget's deficit is 11.34 trillion naira for 2023. The budget's deficit is to be financed mainly by borrowings. 7 trillion naira will come from domestic sources, 1.76 trillion from foreign sources, 1.77 billion from multilateral and bilateral loan drawdowns, and 206.1 billion from privatization proceeds.
The gap between revenue and additional financing and total expenditure amounting to 553.46 billion is being expected to be financed by additional revenue from spectrum fees and also from tax from the maritime sector.
Total revenue available to fund the 2023 budget is estimated at 10.4 trillion naira. 63 government-owned enterprises are to provide 3.87 trillion naira. Oil revenue share is projected at 2.29 trillion naira. Non-oil taxes are estimated at 2.43 trillion naira, while federal government's independent revenues are projected to be 2.62 trillion naira. Other revenues totaling 7.62 billion naira is expected to fund the budget as well. In summary, 22% of projected revenue is expected from oil-related sources, while 78% is to be earned from non-oil sources.
Recurrent expenditures are broadly in 4 categories, the most significant one being personnel costs. The truth is, currently, there's not much that we can do to bring down the personnel costs. We have actually been managing our recurrent budget as tightly as we can, and what we have in our recurrent budget is largely non-discretionary, and we do not have much room to cut. And that's why we keep submitting that the real solution is in growing our revenues. so we have a greater capacity to, to spend. It is because our revenues are so low that it looks like our expenditures are high.
The projected fiscal outcome in the 2023 budget is based on the PMS subsidy reform scenario, the concrete elephant in the room. In the 2023 budget framework, it is assumed that petrol subsidy will remain up to mid-2023 based on the 18-month extension. While this report is about numbers, the budget is much more. Beyond the figures, implementation matters most. Onyi Sunday, Arise News.
Well, a lot to talk about,
Yes, a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, not very positive, optimistic things with regards to the outcome of that budget. We've discussed this a number of times here on the show, and even yesterday we had Johnson Chukwu speak to us, just analyzing the budget that was given the assent by the president. Yesterday we did give a live coverage to the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Haja Zainab Usman, to talk about the breakdown of the budget. As Onyi Sunday has highlighted, a few things around the budget that is a grave concern for economists is the budget deficit, the revenue, the projected revenue, and how this will become, a reality. Economists are not quite optimistic, or as optimistic perhaps as the government is as to how much revenue they would be looking to accrue in the next year. And of course, debt servicing. Just simply put, last year, debt servicing was about 80%. So the debt servicing was 80% of the revenue that we got last year. So putting it in layman's terms, it's like earning 100 naira, and for every 100 naira you earn, you spend 80 naira of it paying back to your debtors. So in terms of our nation, we are making money to pay debts. Whereas if we are for economic growth, we are supposed to make money to build infrastructure, to grow the economy, and not to continue to service debt. Some key things as well around this is that the DG of the Budget Office, Mr. Ben Akabuizi, had said the real solution is growing our revenue. Unfortunately, what has been highlighted by the minister does not give hope or does not inspire hope in how this particular government hopes to increase or to grow our revenue. Non-oil revenue accounted for a significant percentage of the last cycle. We know that there wasn't a lot realized from our oil exports because of oil bunkering and oil theft, and this hasn't been decisively dealt with to inspire confidence or hope. Also, looking at some key allocations in the critical sectors that she mentioned, she talked about defense and security, taking 13.4% of the budget. Second largest allocation to education at 1.79 trillion, which is 8.2% of the budget. This still falls, despite the highest allocation in recent times, still falls way below the recommended 26% by UNESCO. Infrastructure takes 5.7% of the budget. Something that wasn't mentioned as one of the critical sectors is agriculture. Agriculture takes 1.1% of the budget, and particularly for this government that has been big on promoting the agricultural sector, it is quite unfortunate to see such a low allocation to this sector, especially if this is a budget that's meant to promote economic growth. Well, I mean, they've called it fiscal sustainability and transition. Something else, and I'll wrap up on this one, is the projection that subsidy will be taken off by mid of this year. That is interesting because by mid-term of this year, this current administration would no longer be in power. So they are passing on, perhaps the kind of transition they're looking at is passing on a huge debt burden to the next administration, whoever that may be. And that is the big, it says 77 trillion naira being passed on as debt to the next administration. It will be difficult for them to hit the ground running if there's no money to hit the ground running, and that is quite an unfortunate situation, especially for Nigerians. Yes, we have 21.8 trillion naira as our budget, but put that side by side by 200 million Nigerians. That is not anywhere near enough to meet the expectations or to grow the economy. So unfortunately, not very excited about this budget. It's not doing well for the economy, and we'll see how this will be implemented in the long run.
Dr. Bati?
Okay, a number of issues that need to be addressed, and we need to compartmentalize them properly. When the Director General of the Debt Management Office, Patience Unia, discloses that the country is going to have a debt profile of 77 trillion, when you add everything together, government is going to borrow 8 trillion, according to her, before May 29. The debt stock, existing debt stock, is about 44.6 trillion. Then waste and means, 22.3 trillion at interest rate of 18.5%. And then she talked about promissory notes, which she says are not really borrowings as such, but we are using borrowing promissory notes. Now, when you add all of this together, the next government is going to have a debt stock profile of 77 trillion naira. In layman's language, what it means is that whoever is going to become president of Nigeria is going to inherit an empty treasury.
Yes.
The only problem now is that it is not possible for this administration to turn around and say, blame the PDP, blame Goodluck Jonathan. It's not Goodluck Jonathan that has created this. That was a missing segment of the explanation offered by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. Now, with this humongous debt that Nigeria is going to have on top of its, on top of our heads by May 29, the Minister of Finance, the incumbent Minister of Finance, says Nigeria is not even thinking about debt restructuring, and that we're just going to find a way to pay our debts. Where would that come from? And that takes me to the next point made by Patience Unia, who said, well, we will get some relief if the National Assembly can just legalize the ways and means of over 22 trillion. That what that will help is that it will reduce the interest rate. That at the moment the interest rate is 18.5%. If it is legalized, if it is securitized for the next 40 years, which means a child born today will be paying debt in the next 40 years. That's the kind of fiscal legacy.
And it's illegal.
That's the kind of, according to Section 38 of the CBN Act, that's the kind of fiscal legacy that adults, people who went to school, will stand in front of microphone and be recommending. And she was very frontal about it, that, the National Assembly should legalize the securitization, and that it will bring the interest rate down to 9%. And that if it comes down to 9%, Nigeria will have a breather. So these are some of the contradictions in the presentations yesterday. And then the other issue is revenue. Patience Unia argued that, look, if you can balance the debt to service ratio, the revenue to debt service ratio, we they put at 80.6% in the year 2022, and you get better revenue in the year 2023, that maybe Nigerians can breathe a little. Okay, this debt service to revenue ratio, where is that revenue going to come from? Mrs. Ahmed told us that it will come from non-oil, ICT, and agriculture, from where we made more money in the year 2022. But yet, we had a budget, a deficit budget in 2022. We have a deficit budget in 2023. So how are you going to fund that deficit budget? You will borrow. You will borrow more. Over 8 trillion between now and June. Okay? Then, what is the other argument that Mrs. Ahmad put up? Mrs. Ahmad said, the subsidy has to go because a provision of 3.36 trillion has been provided for fuel subsidy. But we all know that the stakeholders, World Bank and others, had said you can't sustain that because it's only 3% of the poor people in Nigeria who probably benefit from fuel subsidy. That it's a subsidy for the worthy. So we're back to 2012, The same old argument. And she had said, when she presented the medium-term expenditure framework, she had said that, look, if Nigeria does not adopt a model of ending subsidy by May 29, that Nigeria will not even be able to fund any capital project in the year 2023. So we are back to that same spot. What is the guarantee that the morning after, in June 2023, that the new government that takes over will not say, no, we have to study this matter. And we too, we need another 6 months. After all, the Buhari government gave 18 months extension. Let us take 6 months. And then we'll be back to square one. It looks like we're in a deep hole. And people are digging that hole further.
Yeah.
Even when you look at the benchmarks, they told us yesterday there is 17.6% inflation projection.
That can't be.
Inflation now is over 20%, over 21%. So where is that 17.6 coming from? Zainab Ahmad was telling us that the growth rate projection for 2024 will be maybe 3.4%. For 2025, it will be over, 3.5%. But for this year, every projection says it will be about 2.29%. If you go and talk to people who have been monitoring the subject, Muda Yusuf, Johnson Chukwu, Mr. Bismarck Rewane, they will tell you that, look, single-digit growth rate, GDP growth rate, cannot help this country. There was a point where we were talking of double digits, expectations and all of that. Okay, they blame problems in the world. But are we making the effort? We're not making the effort. They say fuel production, non-oil sector, oil and gas sector is not what we have to rely on. We are no longer a mono economy. So why was the president in his budget speech, before signing it into law, why was he talking about the fact that we need to ensure that all the agencies meet our production quota? So there's that contradiction at that level. But above all, the bigger elephant in the room is that the finance minister was saying that the finance bill will be signed in a matter of days. Which finance bill are they signing? The same finance bill that House of Representatives did not allow people to make inputs into. They announced that they will invite stakeholders. They passed it before the date of the public hearing. The Senate gave 24 hours notice. That public hearing did not take place. They quickly passed it. And yet the manufacturing sector, NECA, the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, is protesting that the manufacturing sector, the employers sector of Nigeria, is saddled with over 50 taxes, including the increase in education tax to about 3.5%, including the increase in CIT tax from 35% to 50%. Who will do business under that kind of economy? Not to talk of the contradictions with regard to the Petroleum Industry Act, which would result in disinvestment and discourage investment. They should not sign that finance bill until those issues that have been raised by stakeholders are addressed. What it means technically is that the framework for funding the 2023 budget, as at this moment, does not exist. Yeah. So do we really have a budget? Maybe the experts should address that.
Dr. Abati, two things I've learned in my life. When you are in a hole, the first thing you should do is stop digging. What we have done with this budget is that we have dug the hole deeper. Madam Bobby has calls it the hopeless budget. It's reflective. We know our problems, but we don't have the will to solve them. And what do? We break laws to solve our problem, but it puts us in bigger jeopardy. I'm sorry I've announced to you and I'll bust your bubble, Dr. Abati. That finance bill that is overtaxing every sector of the economy, which will make Nigeria's corporate tax to go to about 36%, will be signed. It's not this National Assembly that is a rubber stamp. It's been passed already. Let me shock you. The securitization that is illegal, that's at variance with Section 38, will be passed. They will securitize that loan in your presence. Is it not them? Lawbreakers, they will break the law. But they forget that this fiscal responsibility we're talking about is for our own good. Last year deficits, this year deficits. There's already big problem in fact, all the 18 presidential candidates, you see your problem, you should be crying. And please, I beg you, when they swear you in, whoever emerges in May 29, don't come and tell us Buhari has failed. We know he has failed already. Don't come and be telling us that like the APC was telling us about the failure of Jonathan. No, we don't want that. Don't come and clear Ogian's stable. Please get to work. And please, I beg everybody, all Nigerians, we have to take some hard decisions. Subsidy has to go. Because we know the solutions to our problem. The indices are bad. 77 trillion, we have to look for a way to pay this money. As we speak today, recurrent expenditure over 8 trillion. We can't account for what we are doing with the money. We can't account for what we've done with ways and means. Last year, we made over 6 trillion in revenue, being 6.7. We spent 5.4 trillion to service debts. Some people will open their mouth and say, Nigeria has a good debt to service. Nigeria has a good debt to GDP ratio. It's just 35%, one of the best in Africa. But they forget that Nigeria also have a revenue problem. We are not even making as much money as South Africa. Nigeria's per capita spending on citizen is $180. South Africa's per capita spending on citizen is $2,100 and something dollars. Egypt is $980. What the government spends on you per capita spending is less than 150,000 naira. South Africa is about 1.4 million naira. Can we do the math for Egypt? So we have not gotten it right over the years, but this is the time for solutions. We know they have failed already. How can we raise revenue? It's not by overtaxing the sectors. I had more to say. In fact, I've not even started, but I will respect my producer that is in my ears now that we need to move to the next important story. A federal high court in Abuja has quashed allegations of false asset declaration against INEC chairman, Professor Yakub Mahmoud. The claimant, Sabina Uzobaka, sought an injunction of compelling the INEC chairman to step down as the chairman of the commission pending the conclusion of investigation. The claimant also sought an order of court barring the INEC chairman from holding or assuming any public office for a period of 10 years. However, the court, in its judgment, found that the declaration of asset by Professor Yakubu was lawful, valid, and in compliance with the law, that he cannot be investigated by any of the security agencies listed by the claimants. The judge subsequently and consequently barred security agencies from investigating the INEC boss over his valid asset declaration. Ayo.
All right. Okay, so this is reminiscent, and interestingly or coincidentally, it's before the same Justice Emi Hassan of the High Court in Abuja, where the claimant had brought a petition before the courts against the INEC chairman. Now, beyond the judgment which you've already talked about, Rufai, is the timing as well. Only a few weeks back, and we're still reeling from that episode with the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Governor Emefiele, and the fact that the same court had also asked the DSS to desist from further what they said trumped-up charges, terrorism charges against Godwin Emefiele. And now we have the INEC chairman. You can't, of course, but wonder why this is happening 50 days to elections on the 25th of February, and the distractions that this pose. Imagine if the court didn't rule in this way, and they'd removed the INEC boss, and then a few days to elections, we are scrambling and finding ways to sorting out INEC issues while trying to also figure out how the elections will work out. You begin to wonder who are the people behind these petitions and court cases, and what is the motive or the mission behind these situations. So I commend Justice Emi Hassan for striking out the suit and also asking these agencies to desist from investigating further. He said that his asset declaration is valid. And then for us as Nigerians, more than ever, and I really give kudos to the coalition of united political parties who have spoken out against this, because Nigerians must protect their mandates, protect the elections coming up, and speak up against these continuous, shall I say, is it targets by the DSS and other security operatives on critical people and personalities to the elections. For Mr. Emefiele, it was shortly after the CBN regulation on cash withdrawals and the redesigning of the Naira, after which they said it was, alleged terrorism charges. For Professor Yakub Mahmoud, it is around his declaration of assets, which the courts have said it was valid. And so, again, like I mentioned, we must begin to ask, who are the people behind this? What has the DSS, what does the DSS have that we don't know? What information about the elections coming up? And then, can we encourage them to focus on their core responsibilities, core duties, which is internal security and securitizing the nation? Very important.
Dr. Bati?
Okay, the issue here is that in Nigeria, since the return to civilian rule in 1999, Nigerians have tended to take election as war. Mm-hmm. Every election cycle, you see people coming up with all kinds of fifth columnist ideas to derail the process, to compromise the process, to tarnish the integrity of the process. In the same country, we have had on one occasion when people drove a truck into the headquarters of INEC a few days before the election. In the same country, let's come quickly to this current process, we have had some people going to court to say that INEC cannot use electronic transmission, cannot use biometric verification, what is popularly known as BVAS, contrary to the stipulation of an established law. And now, at some other times, you have had people targeting the person of the INEC chairman himself to say the INEC chairman must be removed. They tried it in 2015. That was resisted. Now in 2023, a gentleman called, I don't know whether it's a gentleman, that's for the court to decide, called Somadina, went to court and asked the court, Federal Capital Territory High Court, the court of Justice Miriam Hassan, to ask for an order of mandatory injunction. One, to say that the INEC chairman, falsified his declaration of assets. And second, for the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, to be barred for the next 10 years from holding any office in any territory of Nigeria. And Justice Hassan ruled as follows. One, that the allegations were unsubstantiated. They were fabricated because Professor Yakubu, INEC chairman, was able to provide evidence that indeed he made proper declaration of his assets and he provided proof of how he came about those assets. And on the basis of that, the learned jurist ruled that he had no case to answer and that those allegations were fabricated. I think with due respect, the only missing link in the ruling of the learned jurist, Justice Miriam Hassan, is that she did not award costs against the plaintiff. Mm-hmm. Because the rules of court do not allow you as a litigant to come before the temple of justice with frivolous and vexatious allegations. What the court simply said was that the allegations against Mahmoud Yakubu were frivolous and vexatious and will amount to an attempt to waste the time of the court and to waste the resources available to the court. I think the learned jurist should have awarded costs against the plaintiff and also these lawyers who are forum shopping and who see the election as chop time and will take any issue and go to court and put up useless arguments. So I think, going forward, the courts of law must sanction all these persons. Now, the second ruling that, His Lordship gave is that the police, the DSS, the Code of Conduct Bureau, that they have been barred by the court from further investigating or seeking to investigate those allegations that came before the court. And this is understandable because it is very clear by the full weight of the ruling that this is not just a frivolous suit. It's also clear that given the timing, it looks like an attempt to derail the 2023 electoral process. It also looks like an attempt to lower, in the estimation of right-thinking members of the Nigerian community, and also by extension the international community, the reputation and integrity of the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission of Nigeria. So what the court has done is to protect its integrity, and also from a public interest, public policy perspective, to protect the 2023 electoral process. This does not mean, however, that some other elements will not approach the court with frivolous allegations and cases, but the judex must be very firm in awarding costs against those persons who seek to waste the time of the court and who seek to derail the 2023 election process.
You see, if for anything, President Muhammadu Buhari, I thank you. I thank you. And I did that deliberately. You see, this electoral law you've signed in, sir, is now making politicians, like they say in local parlance, run kaba everywhere. It is obvious. Also, the CBN policy, good one. Because all the loopholes are being blocked as we speak. And we knew it. The first attempt was to discredit the CBN boss just because they passed a law leading up to the election period. That is, no, will not favor politicians. So they tried to arm twist. The court has also ruled in the man's favor. And secondly now, it is an attack on the INEC chairman. Anyway, we saw this coming. And kudos also to our very good friend, Mike Igini. Because he also constantly said here that the trust of these 2023 elections will be by the judiciary standing tall. And kudos to the judiciary for standing tall. Because more of them will still bring in these frivolous backroom dealings to stop the electoral process. But I think the next loophole INEC should look at now should be the ad hoc staff. Because now they are going to target the ad hoc staff. Because you see, we have a country where a lot of people are less busy. They are jobless. So politics for them is win at all costs. And sometimes, even if they are joining the politics to add value to Nigeria, it will have been better. But they join politics to steal from the government and crush the country and run the economy badly. So these are people that are the nefarious needle needling the prospect of Nigeria because of their own selfish interest. So everybody should be on guard. The next point of call they are going to target is the ad hoc staff in INEC. And that's why the judiciary, every paraphernalia in government, and please also the DSS should stand firm and continue to do his good patriotic work and not be drawn into the shenanigans of politicians. For every $5 million they give you, they will make 50 billion in return. Let us stand firm and make these elections good. If for anything, one thing President Muhammadu Buhari will be remembered by will be this electoral law signed into law, Beavers. It's not going to be business as usual. And that's why you are seeing all of this activity. Sarika Bakaba. We need a sane country. We need a country that is beyond politics, but that thinks of the solutions to the challenges we face. Nigeria is on its knees. 77 trillion. If they share that money amongst all of us, we are already owing debts just because of some people's misnomer. We must not allow people truncate our country. This country is blessed. It's the best kept secret in the world. It will do well and it will rise. Arise, Nigeria.